And here we go.
Wonderful. Oh, hello everybody, and we are so happy to see you guys already in the audience. Yes, the audience. I feel like
Audience. Yeah.
the stage that this was a grand theater, and everybody
That's
had
right.
to take their seats, please. Thank you so much.
That's right.
Oh, well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Flow from Ohm School Live. We are here with GP Walsh, as you know, and myself, Lisa Berry. And thank you for all the hellos to both of us already. Ooh, so if you have seen either the newsletter or any of the posts about today's, which is Ancestral Burdens, I would love for you to raise your hand, just comment to say, yes, I saw the picture. Wow, it really caught my eye. I need to hear about this one. Or wow, I've never thought about this, but could this be the answer to all my problems?
I'm not sure it's the answer.
He's not allowed to answer because then everybody will go thanks and then leave. So
that's right.
So,
yeah, it's right. It's like a webinar. You hold the big pitch to the end. Yeah.
Yes, that's what we're holding out for. And so, hello, everybody. We've got, yes, around the world. That's what is amazing about these GP. And we're not only talking about around the world, we're talking about ancestral today, like around every lifetimes, timelines, generations, cultures, just whoosh,
all of it.
It's all of it. And so today is called Ancestral Burdens because some comments and questions came up this week around transgenerational. Like, can we hand down or pass down or even acquire, inherit, even though we don't want to, some things that we either don't know or that we do know and we blame it on there, or we think it's the reason, or we have no clue why we have these feelings and thoughts like we do. So we're literally, I'm student team today, and I'm tackling it all. Student team. So GP, ancestral.
Wait.
Oh yeah, let's get ready. Here we go.
Okay.
The word ancestral. So a lot of us are really excited. We go, oh, this is my ancestors' way of living, or my family tree. Is that where we're going to start with some of these things like ancestral, because they have a pattern? Do they have a pattern to them, and can we inherit them?
Well, just the very fact that you look like your parents, kind of gives it away.
Yes.
And when children come as it's pretty much a blank slate, right? There's obviously every child naturally has certain tendencies and preferences, and there is a potential in every child, right? But that potential is going to be shaped by the environment in which it arrives, in which it happens, right? You can take a plant that needs a lot of sun, you plant it in a forest, it ain't going to grow very well, if at all, right? Yeah. So it's this. The pure potential of every child is going to be completely formed by the environment in which it appears. And the environment, of course, is the ancestral environment. It's your home, it's your tribe. Let's not forget that the same thing happened to your parents and their 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 parents, all of which has been shaping and morphing this container or environment in which you eventually appear. And then begin to conform yourself to the shape of that environment. So when you think about that, it's you can't separate the two. Even if you were to look at it purely physiological, from a genetic point of view, which is not really that fair, but. Even the particular common genetic makeup is a result of the parents. So the body is a combination of those kinds of factors, plus all of everyone that went beforehand, right? So it's really all there. But which of that potential and the infinite potential of an individual being can be absolutely anything, right? And it's now been shown through neuroplasticity and the way that the genetics work, that it's not the hand you're dealt, right? That it is simply the potential. It is the potential of this particular form to give expression to something. But what actually happens is they get turned on and off, and that's completely environmental.
Yeah, and perception with environment, because how many of us have siblings, right? I have a sister raised saying, at some point of our lives we were the same. Though she's older, so she was there first. She's like, I like to give that to her. And so we did have the same environment, we had the same ancestors, the same culture, and yet very different perception, very different outlook and outcomes, and then a lot of similars as well. Like, it bonds us. The similarities and our differences can bond us. And today, as we mentioned the word burdens, because I wanted to dive in about trauma, ancestral trauma. And okay, in my brain, I thought about asking, like taking it right to the egg and the sperm and in the womb, and what is influence. But it is well beyond that, before that. First of all, when it comes to trauma, can we really, me sitting here, Lisa, am I going to have any of the trauma in my cells from 200 years ago, from my ancestors?
Absolutely. Yeah. Any unresolved trauma just keeps going, because it inevitably expresses itself from generation to generation, right? So the trauma of your great grandparents will be reflected in the trauma of your grandparents, reflected in the trauma of your parents, reflected in the trauma of you. It's impossible to determine where it started, right?
Yeah.
And they've shown that. They've taken mice, interestingly enough, and I can't remember exactly. They took like a very pleasant smell that would even be a pleasant smell to mice, like lavender. And they basically did something to them to give them a reaction that every time they smelled it, it was just like panic. There was just, right? So they basically, I mean, it's horrible to think they do such things, but they did. They basically trained it to react to that. They're the offspring of that lab rat reacted the same way to the lavender.
Yeah. Is it association, or is it just response to keep safe?
It is. It's where that line is just impossible to say. I mean, what's physiological, what isn't? Is we did in the previous show, it's the mind-body continuum. It's a circle. You cannot separate. Only conceptually, in our reductionist model of things, do we separate emotions, sensations, and thoughts, the mind, the body, the soul, all of that. Because in fact, they're not. And like any system, you touch one part of it, you'll touch the other, right? In any system, if you adjust one part of that system, the whole system changes, right? Because it's completely interconnected. And which, makes you wonder, well, what is it at all, right? And while it's useful to break things down so we can, like, specialization and study them, you miss, you can't see the forest for the trees. You miss the interrelatedness of it. And from a spiritual perspective, they are all one thing. They're all different aspects of exactly the same thing. And therefore, what we would call genetics is in fact mind, is in fact emotion. They are not different. As a matter of fact, even talking about genetics or DNA is a concept in your mind. We're looking at a phenomena that occurs and trying to come up with an explanation of it. Now we call it DNA, environment, interaction, neuroplasticity, genes switching on and off. There's a name for that. Morphogenic fields, all of these kinds of stuff to try to explain what we actually experience. But the model by which we're doing that is reductionist, is materialistic, is contrary to the approach of wholeness. In which case, you don't see it as many things; you see it as one. So you can't draw a line between what's happening in the body physiologically, what's happening in the environment, what's happening in your own psychology. And which means you can't divorce it from anything that's ever happened before.
Is that why some people who, and Bernadette, you're ahead of me here. I'm teasing. Adopted, right? So I'm coming along the lines. If you never knew if you got switched with your cultures and your environment, and your ancestors are now, you're told they're your ancestors, but really they're not, you know, is that because you still had to be born in the same, in the body of your mother? I mean, you were made there, and so
Mhm.
you're gonna still have some of those traumas, even for a teeny tiny part of your life, which is your conception.
You could, yes, 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 you could, and it's very fascinating. The sense of the origin and all of that, because there will be could be some remnant of the ancestral burdens that came down through the biological parents, um, even though they're completely overridden by a completely different environment. You not speak the same language, have the same uh, cultural models or mythology. Um, I mean, imagine being born or raised in a culture that never heard of the fall or original sin, which
Yeah.
is well over half the world,
Yeah.
way more, like a 3/4 of the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. I have
it's just
like,
never heard of it. That's not the model. So uh, you can see it in terms of the cultural burdens that come down, right? And to simply reduce that to physiology is just, I think, is naive and muddies the waters. You can't separate them.
right.
The and we are far more traumatized by the cultural lineage than we are by the physical lineage, because the physical lineage can be anything, right? It's pure potential, right? What gets turned on and off, what um, parts of you are allowed to be expressed, and what need to be suppressed, which is going to turn the whole thing off and put the whole system into particular form, is completely determined culturally.
Yes. And how we each as individuals feel safe, um, because
Yes,
we'll do different things because we've had a different reaction from our environment at some point to say, oh, I'm safe when I do this, but I have a sister and she might go, well, I don't feel safe when I do that, and vice versa. So
exactly.
it comes back to that safety thing. And you,
Always.
you said over, I just have to tell you this. I for me, it was shocking. It was the first time I experienced this. I was dating a fellow, and it was a joke kind of made, and I couldn't figure out why he wasn't laughing. And I was like, he's got to understand this joke. Like, I just couldn't. It was about Adam and Eve and the rib being not donated, but made out of the rib. And
He
I'm
was
like,
he was the first organ
he
donor.
was the
Yeah.
first organ donor. And it's funny. This guy just wasn't. I was like, I don't. I asked him. I said, well, and I sounds like I can't believe I'm asking this question, but I said, but you know the story of Adam and Eve. And he's like, what are you talking about? He goes, that is a ridiculous story. Whoever would make that up? He had never heard of it in his life. And I was just like, what world am I in now? Right? But
Yes.
it was shocking to me. And so I love that you said that if we had never heard of certain stories or never told certain stories, or maybe my mother shared stories with my sister that she didn't tell me just because it was a different time. And now we have these different, um, like you said, turned on beliefs, or our culture, what do you call overwritten cultural lineage. And we've overridden
Hmm.
different things. And now we're acting with using different safety mechanisms because it's a different perception.
Well, the bottom line is always safety, and we're experiencing a completely different phenomena, which is a result of the industrial age and now of the information age. Prior to like 350 years, the beginning of the industrial era, the culture was pretty much the only thing that determined your ancestry, the family you were in, because the villages, everybody they thought the same, they had the same religion, went to the same church. So it was pretty much a closed system. There was no outside influence, right?
Mhm.
Well, with the coming of the industrial revolution, and all of a sudden people are off the farms and now in the cities, right? And children aren't just walking around with mom and dad all the time, they're in schools. All of a sudden there's this outside influence comes in, so now the culture is no longer just being handed down from generation, but it's actually exerting a new influence on it. And now, at the rate of change and with information, it's even more extreme. My brother is 5 years older than me, right?
Okay.
and and the difference between us is absolutely night and day. He was right at the end of the whole 50s era, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he had that kind of ideal and that sort of stuff. And I was right at the end of it, and I became the hippie, and he was like the straight, just like this.
Yes, yes.
And 5 years apart, same family, same upper, same everything, right? Um, and he got used to get tied in the backyard instead of in bed like me.
Right.
um, but simply the shift in the external culture and the information was so dramatic that we went from completely different directions. Right now, that wouldn't have happened 300 years, 300, even 100 years ago.
Not, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So now
The speed.
it's completely different, which is of course really something dramatically powerful to consider the influence of media. Um, it's pretty stunning when you really look at it, how much power it has, especially over kids. And media is nefarious. It has no interest in the well-being of the children. It only wants to either use them to get their disposable income, or it wants to use them to demand or annoy their parents until their parents use their disposable
Pawn.
income. So the culture has completely betrayed its responsibility.
Right.
And
At that point, it would be even difficult for us to even tune into. Oh, now we're dealing with current traumas, let alone ancestral traumas.
yes,
We can't even get to, like, we can't keep up. I think about how, Tuesdays are my garbage days, everybody. So, I got my garbage and I'm keeping up. But if I miss one, I really
pay the
so
price.
but it does, it piles up. And so that's, I think,
It piles up.
piles up. And we've got ancestral trauma piling up on top of cultural trauma, on top of our generations now as we go. Two questions I'm going to focus on, and we can pick which one goes in the best order. Bernadette's asking one of my questions. She's like, she's in my head. How do we how do we know when we have healed a trauma so that we can hopefully help it passing along? And how, I forgot the other one now. Okay, let's work with that one, because now
Let's look at that one. Yeah.
Okay.
You know when it's gone when you're no longer reacting. When the event takes place and your reaction to it is different or not at all. That's it, because the trauma itself is invisible. You can't see it. The trauma is like the potential, right? There's when I hit the N key on my computer, an N will come up on the screen, right? But the potential for that to happen is always there, right? But it doesn't happen until I hit that button. And so traumas are like that, right? This traumatic material is simply it is the way the system has programmed to respond to various events as they take place. And the trauma just determines the character of that reaction. And as a result, it makes the reaction a condition. It makes it pre-programmed. It's automatic. There's, until you become conscious, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Now, the first step is to becoming conscious of it. Then you realize that you're reacting, right? Then a little bit of inquiry into it, and you find that you are reacting, that the reacting is there, but you're aware of the reaction. You may even discover the origin of why it's there. And you begin, what happens is that awakening is taking place, you're creating a new inner environment. Now, the system, of course, that's its nature, is it's adaptive. It will always respond to the environment. When you're not conscious, the environment in which you are acting and responding is the ancestral environment combined with the external environment when you're not conscious. So it's all the pre-programmed stuff. When you become conscious, it's not you have to go in and pull out one trigger and put into another. That's kind of the brute force method of most self-help and law of attraction, and visualize, to your veins pop out and kind of thing. Instead, what you do is you create a different environment. If you create a different environment, the system is going to start adapting to that environment. And the more that it sees that environment is both safe and consistent, the more it will drop the trauma. And remember, the trauma is pre-programmed responses to events because it anticipates certain results. So it's defended against those results. If it gets triggered and it doesn't go off in that pre-programmed direction, and instead it discovers safety because you've created a safe environment, the triggers begin to fall away. This is the only way it works.
Oh, okay. That was an incredible, if everybody could rewind and just listen to that 2 minutes as that lesson, that was beyond fabulous. And it's made me question, to dive deeper. Because as you say, we don't respond the same way. And then we go, oh, we're building a new environment. That was perfect. So what if we build a new environment that is actually, and I don't want to say worse, but let's just say I'm beaten down. I'm tired of reacting. So I stop reacting, but not because I'm not reacting more. I'm just tired and can't do it anymore. I'm like, whatever. It doesn't mean I'm healed. It doesn't mean the trauma has been, it's just that I might now go, you know what, when I don't react, it ends. So maybe I'll just be a depressed person now because nothing can hurt me. So it can go on the bad side, like I don't
It
want to
sure
say bad,
can.
unhealthy
Yeah.
side. How can we recognize when, because, and I'm thinking about moms when they just go, I don't care, eat the dessert. I'm tired of saying no, just eat the thing, right? It's like,
Yes.
that's not good though either.
Well, no, and because it isn't really a healing of the trigger.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just the trigger's trying to find a different strategy to try to avoid yet another pain. In this case, it's the pain of just being pestered by the kids, right? And you're being pestered by the kids because you're not clear to them exactly what the standard is. If you're unyielding in that standard, they'll stop. They give up, right? They only keep doing it because they know you'll break at some point. If you don't break, they'll just give up. Right? That's just the way it is. You have to be, it's loving, but you're just firm. That's the way, and kids need that. Now, because their little nervous systems go, there's a boundary. I feel safe. I'm inside that boundary. I know exactly where that limit is. There's a safety in there. Whereas if they don't know, they just keep there's nothing positive about that. So depression is that the trauma has become so severe, it simply won't let you move at all. And so everything inside just gets shut down, because if every motivation that comes up in you meets with nothing but resistance or abuse, at some point you don't want it to even come up. You don't want to have a desire. You don't want to have any motivation, because every time you do, it hurts. And so the natural and basically the only thing that will work is for the nervous system to shut down the arising of all motivating desire. And that's what depression is. And we all have it to a certain degree. And we cannot mistake compensatory behaviors that compensate for the absence of that ability to express yourself, for a way of overcoming the trauma. It's a compensation for the trauma. It like an addiction. It's a compensation for the trauma, because it gives you a temporary relief from the pain, right? But the trauma eventually it has long-term consequences, because it isn't really a solution. Right? What you're really craving has not yet been met, and it can't be until there's the trauma. And what is a trauma? It is a behavior created in the nervous system that's made automatic to restrict certain behaviors in order to keep you safe. It isn't a judgment of those behaviors, other than they don't give you say it may be the best part of you, being creative, or being loving, being expressive, all of those things. If acting those out, which was perfectly natural to you, met with pain, or, of any kind, diminishment, all the way from just a mild diminishment all the way to severe abuse, the nervous system has no choice but to shut that down. The shutting of that down creates a disconnect from your own nature, right? And that's the trauma. That's what trauma is, that disconnect. Um, and it's simply a defensive mechanism.
Two things. Now I need clarification on one thing. Did you say sometimes the trauma can be the best part of you? But if trauma's you're disconnected.
No.
No.
The trauma has disconnected you from the best part of you because it's dangerous to express the best part of you.
Oh, I'm glad I clarified that one.
Yeah, if I said that wrong, boy, that's kind of like the opposite. Yeah.
Those are my ears. So in a weird way, when we're blaming others, our ancestors, our parents, our children, our spouses, it's actually, you still haven't been defeated, which is good because you still have a little bit of a desire and a hope.
Oh, it's better. Anger is way better than despair.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to bring blame up because sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times people will blame, well, my mother did this, has this, my aunt, so I'm going to get it. I have it. That's why I do it. That is a safety mechanism, perhaps, and it has not yet been healed. Am I on the right track? And I'm going to compare it to, I'm using my sister because we're dealing with ancestors here. My sister is so afraid of everything and anything that my family has ever had in their lives that we are predisposed to it. And I have the complete reversal. I have I will get nothing that anybody had in my whole entire life unless I decide. So, but it's not that it's good or bad. I may be, I may be in danger all the time, and she's always protective. Who knows? But how do we know when it's well? Is it we will hang on to it because until it doesn't protect us? Is that?
Well, you're not hanging on to it. It's hanging on to you.
Okay.
This is not the kind of thing that I'm going to hold it. This is not happening on that level. On a cognitive level, we're feeling frustrated. We're feeling stuck, right? I feel cut off from resources. I try to do something and I can't do it, right? Yeah. None of that's conscious. None of us choose that.
Yeah.
Right. We've been burdened with it. Right. And there's an expression in more enlightened psychology that says we have to take responsibility for what we're not responsible for.
Okay, hold on. all these double negatives. Hold on. We have to take responsible for what we are not responsible for.
Yeah. Because I'm stuck with it. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my doing that I inherited this stuff from my ancestors, right? But I'm the one who's going to have to deal with it.
Yes.
Right. So blame can be a good start. If I've gone from despair to anger, there's some energy in anger, right? And once we begin to realize the kind of things that were done to us, and the insanity of the culture as large, and it's getting more and more insane every day. There is a sense, there's a sense there, God damn it, why did this have to happen to me? Right? Which is not a bad thing, right? Now, if it stays there, it creates a new level of stuckness, right? It creates can create a bitterness and create a hostility. It can make you hate everything, right? You'll see the Illuminati behind every curtain. It can get that extreme because it's still not trying to protect itself, but it still doesn't have the power to heal and move into self-expression. And if you realize that what happened to you, they did it because it got done to them, right? There's a certain innocence you can recognize, right? And they passed it on because they weren't conscious of it. And you can celebrate the fact that you got conscious of it because that means you don't have to pass it on. Right? The buck stops here, as the title says, right? But the buck can't stop unless you recognize your power to stop it. But your power to stop it is not going to be easy. I saw this graphically illustrated in my own kids when I started seeing characteristics. They're very little, 2, 3, 4 years old, and I started seeing the characteristics of the family I was in that I hadn't seen before because I was just kind of in it. And I started not going to any family events. I just kind of I'm just not going to have it. I said, it's not going to go past me.
Wow. Oh, goosebumps.
And a lot of it didn't. Some of it did, some of it slipped through the cracks, but it was a very conscious decision on my part. So I don't care what it takes. Kill me. It's just not going on. I'm just not giving this to them.
Right. When you do, I'm so glad that you recognize that that you, yes, because you were so aware and so conscious, because you yourself needed to be safe from it, that you now were being a parent and providing safety for your children to the best of your abilities. Um,
Hmm.
when children, I love that you mentioned that they were only 2 and 4. When children are presenting those kind of behaviors that are unexplained, and the parents go, I don't know why, they were just bad from the get-go.
Yep. The boy's just not right, Margaret.
Yeah. Right. But this isn't true. That's a tough one. So if a parent it's like you were able to take responsibility for what you were not responsible for, that's a big one. So if anybody's saw that they had children right now, they're doing this, they have to know that for whatever reason, somehow they've, I don't want to say they've caused it, they've taught it, they've provided the
Well,
environment.
yeah, they have, and I have to take responsibility for some of the stuff that my kids. I have to take it, right, right, because I passed it on. Why did I pass it on? Because I wasn't conscious of it. Everything I was conscious of did not get passed on, right? And if I was fully conscious, nothing would have gotten passed on, right? But obviously, very few of us are, and so you have that. I mean, that's the whole thing. You have to understand that it is your own unconsciousness that it's passing on. The very fact that you recognize it means that consciousness is awakening.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you just pass it on. My parents didn't question what they were doing. They didn't have any sense of, is this the right thing to do? Right? They just did it. Right? There was no power of discrimination there. Right? That started with me. My brother didn't have any. He still doesn't. Right? He's just adapted a particular attitude in a particular church. My sister did,
Oh.
but she had a very different life than my brother and I did. She was
What's the
13 years
age?
older than me.
Oh, 13.
13 years older than I, yeah. So she grew up in a very different world with an extended family and all sorts of different things. And she and my father were very close. So she had a completely different experience of life than I did. I was the youngest.
Right. Yes.
My mother was the craziest. As condition got worse over time, I got the brunt of it.
Okay. And see, and that's it. Yeah, we will have experienced different parenting behaviors from whoever our parents, whoever raised us, and school teachers even, and wherever we spend a lot of time or have an event. Like one of my events was I was delivering newspapers, and I remember that was probably one of the most formative experiences in my life. And they're they mean a lot. You have freedom and you're out doing something, and if something traumatic happens there, it's very different than when you're at home and in the safety of everybody, and you're on your own now having a
Yes.
traumatic
You're on
experience.
your own.
Yeah.
Ah.
And so as this is the neatest and interesting thing. So I'll ask the question first that I was going to put in the comments. I apologize, I can't put it there for everybody. I'm going to read it. When we have children or people in our care, you could be a teacher, you have students, you're a doctor, you have patients, so it's in there. Are the person in that authority position obligated to think on the person that's in their care's behalf even more than their own? Like, are they all like, there's a free will here, which I was talking about freedom, and there's providing safety, but to which point are we, like, we're going to go mental if we are going, well, what about them, and what about them, and how will they feel, and how will they react? Like, how do you have that line, a boundary of going, here's how much I can pass on or not pass on?
Well, again, it just comes down to consciousness. You don't want to pass on anything that is destructive, and to the degree that you're aware of it, you will at least be engaged in attempting to. You may not be able to stop all of it any more than you can stop it when you're aware of it in yourself. There's certain these patterns, they keep coming up. The more conscious you get, the less reaction takes place in the pattern. But you don't know how long that trigger is going to just keep pushing the button. You just don't know how long it's going to happen. As far as to, that's kind of the art of parenting, as to how do you let go, right? At what point do you start letting go and them having their own experience? My son said to me not long ago, he says, I've realized that parenting is all about letting go.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is the art of it. And it's at some point, you're not going to be making decisions based on what's good for them. Right now you do, right? At a certain point, depending on where they are in their age, but the older they get, the less you have to think about that. To the point where my youngest son went away to college, literally that month, I picked up and moved from San Francisco to New York City.
You were like, I'm out of here.
and they lived with me, right? I was a single father, right? And so, but at that point, it's like, I mean, my youngest son laughs about it. He says, the story about I went to college when my parents moved, it's literally true. He did, yeah. Because at that point, the job was done, right?
Yeah.
I was now free to live however I wanted to live. I still consider the impact and that sort of thing, but if you do they're independent now, right? For better or for worse, I did the best job I could. I kept as much as possible, here, so it didn't get passed on. And at this point, I have to let them go. They're going to have to find their own way. And they are. I mean, we're very close, my two sons and I.
Yes. I think, what's funny is I'm getting the vision of like the parent ties the shoe, but then the child runs and plays, and it might scrape its knee, it might fall, it might just keep going. But that's the thing, is that you have to let the child go run and play, walk, do whatever once you tie the shoe. And you only can tie the best you could.
Yeah. At some point, my granddaughter was climbing up something the other day, and it was probably about 7 feet high, and she slipped, right, and I broke her fall. Of course, I was standing there, but I know another time, there's other times at the playground she's up on something, and I know that I can't get there in time, right?
Yeah.
But what are you going to do?
Right. And these are the burdens that we use the word burden, because we can either take on that belief that we are not that we are responsible for it, or that somebody else is responsible for it. We have to carry this around, and we can be miserable and try to do it, or we can become conscious and aware. And so this is my big question: how do we work with this with the help of a teacher and guide? Because I'm telling you guys, this one, you can't wrap your head around your own things, because sometimes you won't even know it's your thing until you're talking with GP and you're working through it, and you're like, oh, come on, oh my gosh, there's an awakening to that moment of a realization. But how do you help people work through? What does that even look like?
Well, it is the process I call inner reconciliation. The question is, how do you create an inner atmosphere of safety when the nervous system has been trained to assume that the atmosphere is dangerous? And because remember, if the energy system is locked in the idea that the environment is dangerous, it's not going to let down its defenses. It can't. Its whole nature, its whole design is to protect you, and therefore, as long as it believes the environment is dangerous, it's not gonna come off duty. It's not gonna drop the guard, the defenses. And the problem is because of most of our modern therapy techniques and personal development and self-help, they actually compound it. At the root of all of them is the desire to fix you, right? Now, if you look at what happened when you were a child, the parents' desire was to fix you. There's something wrong with you, and you need to be fixed, right? You got this behavior you can't have, you have to have this one. What's the difference when a self-help guru tells you, you have to drop this thought, can't think those things? It's the same thing, right? And the nervous system interprets it as the same thing, which is why self-help doesn't work. Everybody here can testify. They've done a million self-help techniques and almost no results, right? Meager results, or maybe something works for a while. Oh, this is great. And then it stops working, right? Well, the only reason it works is because it tricked the nervous system for a minute. It figured out what was happening, and zoom, those defenses were right back up again, and nothing happens because it runs the show. you can't do anything without its permission.
Right.
So how do you get its permission? How do you get it onto your side? Right. You have to learn how to create an inner environment of safety. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't know of any other way to do it.
You've actually mentioned two top things here is that, and a lot of people will connect, and please let me know in the comments if you do, the inner environment of safety, which I'm really liking that name for later, we'll discuss, because with self-help and with self-development, what I've learned is I do have quite a bit of inner. I feel safe. I feel pretty good. I have some of my own areas that I don't, but I feel pretty good. And so I used to do self-help, self-development, and my gosh, my life would get even better. But now I'm realizing from doing the real self-inquiry work is that I changed the outer environment so that my triggers weren't there. You gotta go. You gotta go. That behavior and thought, out you go. And
That's exactly, yes.
it makes an improvement for a while that you could say, well, yeah, no, self-help was amazing for me. Now, it was helpful to a degree because I was able to witness and be aware that my external environment needed some cleanup. But then I'm still left with me. And well, those are the deepest triggers.
Well, yes. And of course, that's all we're always encouraged, because even trying to change your thought is on a very subtle level, the manipulation of the external conditions. What created the thought in the first place? Where did it come from? Why is this particular thought pattern in place? And, the big proponents of that say, well, you just go in and you change that thought pattern through visualization and affirmation and all that sort of stuff, as if that was the cause, right? And if you do that thoroughly enough, it will have an effect, of course, right? Because you're going to change the external environment. The internal environment is going to react differently. But the underlying traumas and programming that created those thoughts in the first place is still very much there. And you put it absolutely correctly. You simply removed the trigger, and you thought that was removing the program.
I really did.
And it doesn't, which is what I'll do the opposite. I intentionally trigger people. I want to press the button, because if I press the button and you react, and then you learn how to do the reaction without following the programming that says you should act like this, right? Because that's the nature of the whole triggering mechanism. The event happens, the trigger takes place, and it forces you into a particular way of behavior. But if you press that button and you don't go into the behavior, now you're dismantling the trigger. You're dismantling the association between this behavior and this event, right? You're not just getting rid of the event so this doesn't react anymore. It's completely different. It's real freedom where the other is not.
And we're not
saying you cannot control the external environment. How much can you do that, right?
And we're not saying that he's going to sit there with a stick and hit you and until you. I'm not going to let you trigger.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I have different size sticks depending on how tough the problem is. Yeah. No, it's very gentle. You start out very gently. It's just letting yourself feel something that's uncomfortable, right? Eventually, sometimes that's enough for enormous shifts to take place in your life, because just the willingness to sit with something that was uncomfortable has an impact of communicating safety to the system. You're not running immediately. There's a courage there. There's a strength, which creates a different inner environment. As that you get more and more comfortable with that, the nervous system is able to push more stuff to the surface, and the stronger you get. And sometimes something you just literally force the button to get pushed, and you find that you don't react. And instead, when you don't react, the entire story of where it came from, this life, another life, God knows where, ancestral, cosmic, the whole thing can reveal itself, because there's a safe environment for which to do that. And that revelation is not a punishment. That's what happens as the trauma is on its way out. It shows itself on the way out. That's where the freedom comes from.
Now, when we're not okay, so, and just to clarify, because right now I can only imagine, okay, I'm gonna trigger myself, or hopefully not be alone, and if somebody bring up a trigger, but if it really truly isn't safe for me to be there, then I don't stay there. We're
Right.
not saying stay in boiling water, like, and just pretend it's not hot.
Right.
It really must be safe for and how if it's not okay, so it's the story. I'm getting it now. It's the inner reconciliation between that storyteller to go, you're just telling me a story. I'm hearing the story, and with love saying, okay,
Yeah.
thank you for telling me that story. You kept me safe. I no longer need this, but I will need a new one. Do you need a new story?
No, you don't. You don't need a story to function in the world. Animals function very well without a story
It's true.
because they're in tune to the environment. See what happens when we get these triggers and stuff. We lose the capacity to know when you are safe and when we're not. So you'll find yourself in dangerous situations that you shouldn't be in because the mechanism is confused. It can't tell the difference. So places where you should feel safe, you don't. And places where you shouldn't feel safe, you do. Right? This is what happens when that's all cleared away. You trust your instinct says, this guy's not trustworthy, right? Yeah, I'm not going to walk there. And you are confident in it because now it's clear. The like an animal, if it senses it, it doesn't go, right? There's no editing. There's no story saying, well, it's going to be okay. You should go anywhere, right? There's none of that going on. It's purely instinctual. Nope, not doing. And off it goes. And we have that capacity within us, but it has been distorted, right? It's been frozen so that we're relying now on the mind, which is the least functional tool in all of this, and in habitual patterns instead of our genuine sensitivity. We don't have access to the wisdom that is our nature. We've been cut off from it, and it's the trauma that cuts you off from your actual powers, your gifts, your inner resources. And so you find that when it's safe and when it's not. You say no when you mean no. You say yes when you mean yes, and there's no ambiguity about it. It's clarity. It's purely clear because you're in touch with you.
Yeah.
That's the essential trauma. It's a soul disconnect. You are not in touch with who you actually are, and therefore everything would have to be made up. It'd have to be unstable. It's going to be just how the program is reacted, and if the program doesn't know how to react to that, you're screwed. So what it will do is just keep you avoiding what in fact can be these glorious opportunities because it doesn't know how to handle them, and there's no confidence that it can actually be thrive and keep you alive in that circumstance. So it just won't let you get near it. That's why the job promotion doesn't come. That's where that's where the relationship doesn't work. That's why the business doesn't succeed, because it won't let you.
Yes. I have one of my own more questions with this, and then I can see some little questions coming through, and I want to get to them. Is it possible to give someone else the power to break remove our burdens, and I'm referring now here to the Akashic records. Some people think, or other people will go to some other people and ask them to cut ties, spiritual energetic ties within hooks, I've heard them called. Put a field around you, all these things, and going to the Akashic record. I know, break contracts, spiritual contracts, all of that kind of stuff, which really is quite powerful, and people really have some stuff. What's going on there, and is that possible that we are giving this power to someone else to assist us?
Well, in a sense, it always does. In a sense, people give me their power when they ask me to assist them. They're opening themselves up for something greater than themselves, and it's all. Is it successful? Right. What determines if it's successful or not? Our definition of it normally is: did I get a specific result? Right. If I got a specific result, then the process was successful. That's not actually a very accurate way to assess it, right? Because two very different approaches could yield the same result, right? Now, so while there are processes there, I always look, what's the underlying belief? Have I come closer to the truth of my being, or have I just found a more um, esoteric way of adjusting circumstances? And if my attention is always on the success is determined by what happens in the circumstances, it's a sheer giveaway that you're not getting to the root. That the sense of identity is still there, right? The Akashic records and all those karmic things are a record of the false version of you. They are not a record of you because you are timeless. You never had a beginning. You never had an end. You've never had a series of. You've never gone from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. All those have been appearances to you. So none of that applies to the true self. I know that's a big one for people to hear, but karma does not apply to the self.
Did a show on this. I'm using my brain now. Hold on. Because they're all okay. Hold on. It doesn't apply to the true self because the Akashic records are dealing with each aspect that has shown up, but we're not even in that story. We're not even.
Yes, it's all part of the same story. Yeah.
Okay.
See, the story isn't just this life. It's every single one of them. Think of this life. Think of the karma as you. And over your life, how many millions, billions of dreams have you had? Right?
Well, yeah.
With one life. Okay, so think of one essential, and every one of your past lives and all the content of it has been a dream.
Okay.
Who's the dreamer? That's the question.
Right.
Until you know who the dreamer is. Otherwise, you're just kind of sorting out the various aspects of the dreams that have happened. Right. And then we have ideas about in between the dreams and that sort of thing. But in between the dreams is, in fact, the sense of the dreamer. Right? This is beyond all of that. The real you is timeless. It never entered into time. It was never born. It's never going to die. Hope this isn't going whizzing by. This might be too much for folks. I hope it, because everybody is so identified with the body and a personal sense of self, right? I ask a very simple question. All right, in your last life, most people here, I think, believe that in multiple lives that this just isn't it, right? So in your last life, you were as equally convinced that that was you as you are in this one. And now you don't even remember it. Mercifully, by the way.
Yes.
I got enough shit to deal with in this one. Please don't. I don't want to hear about 1,000 other ones of it. But in every single one of them, that was you were just as identical. This was you. This was my life. This is who I am. You may not have been the same race. You might have been the same gender. You might not have been human.
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah. So there was something there that has been the same in every single one of those. What is that? That's what I want to know, because that's not changing.
Right. See, and there's a fly there. See this, and this is why the work is so important to, like, because right now if you guys even, and I know this stuff kind of sorta, but I'm still going, okay, I would want to sit and have a few questions, have you ask me some questions, let me do whatever happens, what happens, because it's not a thought process. It is an aha. Enlightenment really is that. It's like you aha, and then you realize you got aha'd. That's what it's the realization of the aha.
That's right.
If anybody is needing to work with somebody and have a guide, have a teacher, GP is just so fabulous and wonderful. You meet to exactly where you are. And I really want to encourage that right now to reach out. We've created a link, or we have a link that you can.
Oh, okay.
I want to call upon this. We're
going to
go
my
a little
cue.
Longer. Yeah, that's your cue, because we all going to go a little bit longer to go through the questions. But this is so important, because this has such an impact on this life. Hopefully the next lives, but it has, because you are healing the trauma, you are releasing and letting go of the burden that you might not even know you have. You just go, why is my life like this? And so yeah, I won't think of it in my own mind, GP, and I don't think you guys will really either. However, do the self-inquiry work, get some assistance, and if you need a little bit more one-on-one, then absolutely go to gpwalsh.com, work with GP. I love that. It's makes it nice and easy because it's exactly what you're doing. You really are. Oh,
Yes.
so yes, in
Yeah.
that.
I mean, the more I do this, the more I just, you know, it really, when you think about it, the self that's all messed up is trying to help the self. So exactly how far are you going to get?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You need a teach. Everybody needs a teacher.
Yes.
And finding one you can really trust and resonate with isn't an easy thing. And just don't grab onto some guru because they say they are, or they speak with an Indian accent and wear an orange robe. You have to use your own discernment and discrimination about it. But this kind of, it gets so subtle. You have to have somebody guide you through it because it's so subtle, and the mind is so good at protecting itself from you. It is so good at this game of cat and mouse that we do need help. I have a teacher.
Yes.
I go to every single retreat Muji gives.
Yeah.
I'm there. I mean, don't trust a coach who doesn't have a coach.
Yes, exactly. And GP, when I read Eckhart Tolle in 2003, and I'll be honest with you, I thought he was a whack job, and I was like, what is he talking about? I was like, I don't even.
What?
I didn't even not get it. I actually disliked it. It really, it pressed a lot of buttons.
Yes.
And now, 20 years later, I'm like, they were triggers. It wasn't that I just didn't get it. I got it and I didn't like it because I didn't know what to do with it because I was reading
Yes.
the lesson, but I didn't know where to go with it. So
Yep. Yeah.
I needed a teaper. It took me all this time to find you. Could have come a little earlier.
I've been here the whole time.
So I encourage you, if you're feeling something like I really do, even if it's just to book one appointment, just to try that and experience that, because it can really make a big difference. And so I always go for the bottom up, but I think we've got Bernadette in those questions there. Mark had something earlier, but I think we covered that one.
I like the one from Voices.
Voices.
You
Yeah,
see
I
that
saw
one?
that. Cool way of spelling that too. I like that.
Yeah.
I feel like most trauma recovery reinforces trauma. That's my experience. It's a huge industry. It's the hip new thing. Yeah, for me, it is just a story. I'm so sorry. And they're so confused. So Voices, there's a link for you, but in saying that
Well,
right now.
yeah, just to give you some encouragement, I went through that as well. Going all the way back to, I didn't do the primal scream, but John Lennon did, so that's pre-1980, right? So some of these techniques, but I did do some Gestalt, I did ab reactions, I did go through some of these things where the trauma release was as traumatizing as the trauma originally was. And I intuitively knew there's got to be a better way, and there is. Right. I have my way of doing it, which is inner reconciliation, which is a very gentle way of creating an environment where the trauma harmlessly is released. Right. You can't force it. And that's what a lot of these things do. And because it's very dramatic, right? And you can go through these things, there's very dramatic release and it leaves the body so completely exhausted. It feels as if something has happened. In fact, nothing has happened at all. It's really quite deceptive, and I think some of the people who do it are just con jobs, like most TV preachers. And but some of them I think are just really believe in it, and are deluded. That kind of intensity is a shock to the system. It does not want to experience that, so it will create new resistances to it, right? In order to keep that from happening, and so yes, it can destroy you if you head in that direction. There's many techniques where that happens, where it actually does more harm than good. Somebody who has the Kundalini awakening, that their nervous system simply isn't ready for it. I've known lots of people who've their life, they've totally messed up. They're barely functional. So this gentle preparation for it, and creating an environment. If the environment feels safe, the system knows how to get rid of this energy, right, safely. It has no interest in putting itself through this. Right. It says, I think I'm going to make myself feel terrible today. It doesn't do that, right? It, because of the circumstances are severe, it has forced itself into a particular shape. Yeah. And the only way to get it out of that shape is to create an environment where it doesn't need it anymore. Right. That's totally without a traumatic abreaction or some kind of volcanic response. It is totally gentle. It's just a very gentle opening up. And throughout the entire process, there's some times when people try to do it on their own, when I'm with them, I can walk somebody through where it starts to get intense, and I can hold the space for them until they kind of get their legs in it. Oftentimes people will say, well, I've been trying to do it on my own. And I'm like, totally. And I said, okay, well then just say, thank you. That's enough for now. Back off and say, right, this is all I can handle. And the nervous system will go, okay. Right. So you never actually lose control. Right. Right. So when you're with somebody who can be with you, you can go deeper faster. When you're alone, it takes a while to get to that point where you can have that. But this kind of process, it's like I'm dad. You're learning how to ride a bike, right? Right. We've taken off the training wheels, and I'm still holding the bike, right? And I'm running along next to you, and then eventually you're, hey, this is hey, and you turn around, and I'm not standing there anymore. And you go, oh my God, I turned myself. Right? It shakes, but remember, you're retraining the whole system. You don't learn how to ride a bike; your body does. You just have the desire to do it, and so you keep getting on it. And every time you get on it, you fall off, and you get back on it. The body is learning 1,000 little cues, right, to know exactly how to respond in little muscles you can't even feel. That it's constantly keeping you upright. To the point where at first you're shaky as hell, before you know it, you're rock steady, and then you're doing tricks, right? and stuff like that. But that's the body's doing that. You're not doing that. And so you're simply retraining the body into the state of allowing instead of the state of resistance.
Oh, that was good. And is it safe to say, because I read ahead with Voices was mentioning about how do you know when the nervous system is waiting for safety versus denial and avoidance? Now, is it correct that the nervous system actually isn't waiting for anything? It is only responding. So the nervous system.
Correct. It's not waiting for safety. It is the vehicle of safety. It is guaranteeing it. Yeah. Right. But it's constantly reading the environment to determine how it's going to react to it. Right. So as long as the environment remains dangerous, it will maintain its defensive posture. When it sees that it is not, it now recognizes that it can begin to reduce the defenses. Right? Now, this is its nature, because it isn't wanting to stay permanently in a defensive posture. Yes. There's two states of the energy system. One is defense, the other is expression. And the less you are in defense, the more self-expression there is, right? Same energy, right? But if I'm highly defended, I don't have much energy left. It's like when you get a cold, right? It lays you flat on your back because it needs all that energy. There's no creative activity. It needs that energy. No, sorry, we got an intruder. We're going to have to get rid of it. And once the intruder has been vanquished, you start getting your energy back, right? But it's constantly monitoring. I mean, on this energetic level, it's absolutely no different. So if you start creating that environment of safety, if you yourself become safe, right? And it doesn't have to defend against you anymore, right? Because you're not forever trying to fix it, right? Then there's the space that opens up, right? And that space opening up, you feel it, your body relaxes. What that is the energy system is dropping out of its defensive posture because it doesn't need it. It's only there because it needs it, but it never stops monitoring the environment. Not for 1 second. That's its job, right? I I may have used this example before when I was living in New Mexico, up in the mountains. There was a family of deer that used to come and drink from the ponds and stuff that were around there, right?
Oh.
And just watch, they were the mule deers with these huge ears, right? Just these adorable things. And they'd be eating, they'd be drinking water, totally relaxed, but their ears were doing this constantly. The
My
tiniest little sound would be, do I run or not? No, okay. Right? And then sometimes it'd be like, and they'd move off somewhere else. So while they're completely calm, nothing's being triggered, they're monitoring, right? Right. The problem with human beings is that we're creating an artificial inner world disconnected from the real world. And so the system is reacting to an environment that doesn't actually exist. And this is what it needs to be seen. When it sees that this is completely created by the mind, and we step out of the business of creating these these imaginary stories, the whole nervous system just goes, thank God, I'm so tired.
That's funny.
Because it's like, it's been on defense. I mean, forever. And it won't drop out of defense. It'll exhaust the system and kill you before it'll drop out of defense if there's danger.
I'm laughing at the next time somebody asks, what business are you in? I'm in the business of creating realities.
Oh, well, aren't you? I create my own reality. I mean, that's a mantra of the law of attraction crowd. Yeah.
Yeah. This is I have to relate this to as easy. And I love that Voice has mentioned about, something being, it's hip to do this and that. I'm sure it still is somewhere along the line, but in the 90s, a lot of, especially women would go, I'm going to do a cleanse. I'm going to have a detox, and it was like this, I can't do anything or go anywhere for 3 days because I'm going to assault and traumatize my body with all this fiber. And I'm going to volcanically explode and just cleanse myself and then be done with it. But when, as a nutritionist, the way I healthily do it, I was like, you never need to do that if you just do a gentle, I love that word you use, GP, a gentle daily sweep every day. And you keep the little sweep going on there. And then eventually you don't need those big scratchy toilet brushes inside your body because...
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can either wash the 4 dishes you did for dinner now, or you can have a sink full later, right?
At the end of the week, exactly.
Yeah,
so
at the end of the week, yeah.
I like that you say that, and that's what it's like when working with UGP, and when you do find it, because the self-inquiry allows you to do it gently, a little bit, and then it's not so crazy. Like, hey, I'm going to do it all on a weekend retreat, and then, like you always say, then you've removed the triggers, and then you jump back in and go, darn it. Now that I'm back in front of those triggers, it happened all over again. And then
I thought I had that one nailed. Well, no, you were just in an environment where you weren't triggered, which is what the retreat environment is supposed to do. But most of them think that's it. So you have that experience while you're on retreat, but they don't prepare you for Monday morning when all those buttons are being pushed again. They don't prepare you for that. And then you feel like, oh, this is terrible. And then you sign up for another retreat.
Yeah. So even though we do want you to sign up repeatedly for all of these and come every Sunday and every Tuesday for all these things, however, really what that does, it allows you to continue the nurturing process, continue the self-inquiry process, because I don't think we'll ever, I don't know, maybe we'll eventually do, yes, we become the Buddha when we're there, but
don't hold your breath.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath.
When you're there, you're there. I mean, but don't assume anything, because it's you just know, right? In the meantime, just assume that there's more triggers to be had, right? There's more things to be discovered. In which case, you can just be very equanimous about just be present in your life. Be the human being. That's all it takes. Right? You don't have to be anything else. Even the idea of somehow I've got to get enlightened is quite self-destructive. What's wrong with right now? What's wrong with your life? What's wrong with you? I mean, this is what it comes to. That's this kind of very genuine human self-acceptance. That is the ideal in Zen Buddhism. The ordinary human being is the Buddha.
Yes.
It's an acceptance, a total surrender to human life as it is. That is enlightenment.
That's
It is
I
no
like that.
it is not a special state. And that's why it's pure compassion. It has no argument with anything. It embraces life as it is.
Well, see, and that's like, that makes me feel good to end on that note, because like, yes, we're perfect, because we are. Thank you,
Yes.
everybody, all Facebook users, and Mark and David and Elaine and Bernadette and I say this right, Eva. No, it's not. It's
Ava. No, close.
Eva.
Yeah,
Yes,
Eva. Eva, that's close. W's are V's because it's
that's right.
she's Polish. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, and voices and everybody else that I'm missing if I am. But thank you for showing up and staying with us. You know, we will just go until we kind of we go, okay, you've got some good answers there. And just always reach out. Always, you know, just if you need help with anything, you know, you're in the group. And if you're not, please join the group. GP Walsh, spiritual teacher over on Facebook. But better yet, come to gpwalsh.com and get onto the Light Letter. And that's the newsletter. And you can read all those incredible blogs that you write. And thank you, GP. This is always helpful. Always helpful.
It's always fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.